Should landlords sell or keep their rental property in 2026? So this is a question I keep getting asked a lot at the moment. Should I keep or sell my rental property? And we're going to go over that in this video. So I think this is largely coming about due to the Renters' Rights Act. Obviously, that's imposing a lot of changes to the rental market, the private rented sector, etc. And ultimately on landlords, putting a lot more pressure on them to have tenancy agreements in place, property in good condition, etc., etc. And ultimately, I think that's probably the first in a string of changes that are planned by the government over the next decade or so to professionalise the private rental market. So I think that's ultimately hitting the smaller landlords quite hard. I think that's who's probably most affected by it. You know, those who maybe have 2, 3, 4 rental properties, maybe they're accidental landlords, and it's not their full-time gig, if you like. I think one of the biggest issues is if you self-manage as well. If you've self-managed over the last 10, 20 years, that they're probably also landlords who are a bit like, am I really in line with the regulations at the moment? The big question that I always ask, or the main question that I always ask is, do you know the condition of your asset, of your property? I think that's the main issue at the moment. There's a lot of landlords who really don't understand the condition of their property, and ultimately that's probably the biggest risk. Landlord and tenant issues, which the Renters' Rights Act has created a lot of changes with, and you should hopefully be up to date with all those new changes with regards to tenancy agreements, etc. But I think primarily, do you know the condition of your property? Are there any risks in there? Have you got up-to-date electrical certificates? Are there any damp and mold issues? Are there any hazards? Are there any walls that look like they might fall over shortly? Things like that, because I think if you've been self-managing for a lot of time, you're waiting to be reactive. When problems come through the door, you'll go out, you'll fix it, and then you'll leave until the tenant calls again and gives you an issue. Whereas I think landlords need to be a lot more proactive than that going forward. So I think damp and mold is a good example of that, and probably an issue that's going to be very prevalent for landlords over the next 10 years plus. I think the private rented sector is a good example. They have something called AWAB's law, which is coming to force at the moment, which is giving increased onus on landlords, primarily social housing landlords, to basically act quickly and rectify issues with mold, damp, etc. And I think rightly so. It provides a better, more habitable living space for tenants, which is what we should all be striving towards. And that AWAB's law and decent home standard, etc., is something else which is planned to be transitioned over to private landlords over the next decade. So I think that's a good example of something where if you've got damp and mold issues in your property, that's something that you're likely going to have to sort over the next decade. If you've got a long-standing tenant, maybe you're going to have to do the works around them, which can be troublesome, or when they leave, you're maybe going to have to carry out a big refurbishment. So I think that's the main issue that private landlords who are mainly worried at the moment is they don't have a full understanding of the property. So off the back of that, I think that kind of begs the main question: do you have the desire to become that professional landlord, and do you have the desire to improve your properties to a standard where they are compliant with current regulations? Because I think that can possibly be a lot of work. And if you're a landlord who has maybe had your properties for 10, 20 years, they've been a good asset for you all this time, and you probably know that there's some works that need doing, there's been long-standing tenants, etc. So your portfolio probably needs a revamp. You might be like, I'm not, I'm looking to retire. I'm not in the mind frame to really take this on as a professional landlord. And I think those people are probably more likely to be suited to those who might want to make the exit. Whereas if you're quite motivated, maybe you're new to the market, maybe you're wanting to become a professional landlord, maybe it's your full-time job, then I think, maybe keeping those and looking at plans to professionalize your portfolio is probably the better option. I think if you choose to keep, there is a lot of work to be done for a lot of landlords in terms of getting yourself more professionally ready. Now, I think what that typically looks like, in my opinion, I'm a building surveyor, so I would probably say this, but starting off with a full building survey of the property so that you can be fully understanding of the current risks, any potential ongoing costs, so that you can ultimately plan short-term repairs to get the property to a compliant state, and then budget costs over the next 10 years to maybe reach the new levels of compliance that are required. You've got EPC standards and things like that. And then obviously on top of that, you want to have all of your tenancy agreements, etc. in place, which should hopefully already be in place because the Renters' Rights Act's already kind of in force. And then I think ultimately, you know, off the back of that, if that's something that you're kind of not willing to do, then there is obviously various different exit options. I think, you know, there's other things to consider like tax implications, etc. But that's probably not for the scope of this video. But I think ultimately what it boils down to is, are you motivated to become a professional landlord over the next 5 to 10 years? Because if not, then ultimately you're probably going to struggle. You're going to have stresses, you're going to have significant risks. You know, if you've got outstanding issues at your property, you know, ultimately you're at risk right now of, you know, fines, you know, potential imprisonment. It's not a scaremongering video, it's just the truth. So I think ultimately you need to, you know, have a real honest like kind of question, or sit down with yourself and say, you know, is this something I want to do over the long term, over the next 10, 20 years? If the answer is yes, then take steps to become a more professional landlord. And if not, then yeah, there's potential exit options there in various areas of the market. Cheers.